In a world where connection is praised and popularity is often mistaken for worth, solitude can feel like a shadow. But the Stoics remind us that the absence of many doesn't mean the absence of value. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." This series isn't about how to get more friends. It's about understanding, with clarity and compassion, why you might have few, and why that isn't necessarily a problem to fix, but a truth to honor and explore. Through the lens of Stoic thought, we'll examine 9 reasons why friendships may be rare in your life, each a reflection of something deeper within or around you. Let's begin. Part 1. Shyness or introversion. Shyness isn't silence, it's self-preservation. Introversion isn't distance, it's depth. And yet, in a world built for performance, those who don't rush to speak or dominate the room are often misread. The Stoics, however, understood a different rhythm. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men of his time, spent his nights writing to himself. His power wasn't in his volume, it was in his ability to withdraw, reflect, and return to the world with intention. If you find it hard to connect with others because of shyness or introversion, know this: there's nothing wrong with you. The modern world amplifies voices that are fast, witty, and bold, but Stoicism favors those who pause, think, and speak with purpose. Friendship, real friendship, does not demand you abandon your nature. It invites you to share it honestly. Introverts often observe what others overlook. They feel the energy of a room without saying a word. They connect one-on-one in ways that are deep and unforgettable. But because these connections are not made in abundance, they are made slowly, like stones polished by the river, not shattered by the tide. The pain comes when you feel the world expects you to be someone louder, someone quicker, someone else. But the truth is, some souls are meant to echo, not explode. If you are shy, it may take you longer to open up, and that's okay. Let your words be few but full. Let your friendships be rare but real. It's better to be understood slowly than misread quickly. And in the quiet spaces where others rush to fill the void, you bring presence. You bring stillness. And that, in itself, is a gift. So if you're walking through life wondering why your circle is small, perhaps it's because you're not collecting acquaintances. You're cultivating connection, and that kind of work takes time, solitude, and a soul strong enough to be still while the world rushes by. Let's continue. Part 2. Trust issues. Trust is a fragile bridge. When it's broken, we don't just rebuild slowly. Sometimes we stop building altogether. The Stoics never told us to be naive. Epictetus, in his discourses, reminds us not to surrender our inner fortress to just anyone. And yet, when life has handed us betrayal, deception, or abandonment, we often build walls so thick that no light gets in, not even the kind that wants to heal. If you've ever told yourself, "I can't trust people anymore," it's likely not because you hate people, but because you once loved too deeply, believed too openly, gave too fully, and someone took that gift for granted. The wound wasn't just what they did, it was what their actions convinced you about the world and about yourself. Over time, that experience can solidify into a belief that no one can be trusted, and that belief, while protective, also imprisons. The Stoic doesn't demand you swing the gates wide open, but they do ask you to examine whether your caution is based on clarity or just fear dressed up as wisdom. Because trust isn't about forgetting the past. It's about refusing to let it shape your future entirely. It's not about handing everyone access. It's about discerning who has earned it. Often we confuse being closed off with being strong. But real strength, the Stoic kind, lies in discernment, not defensiveness. In being able to say, "I see the risk, and I choose with awareness." If your heart is always in lockdown, it stops beating freely. But when you begin to let people in again, slowly, wisely, you rediscover not just them, but yourself. Start small. A shared story, a vulnerable moment, a sincere compliment. Let trust be something you extend like a lantern, not thrown, not forced, but held gently ahead of you in the dark. And let those who walk carefully toward its light remind you that not everyone is here to hurt you. Because while it's true that trust, once shattered, never comes back the same, sometimes it returns stronger, smarter, softer, and that's more than enough to begin again. Let's move forward. Part 3. Lack of social opportunities. Not all loneliness comes from within. Sometimes it's the landscape around us that feels barren. You might be someone who thrives in deep, meaningful conversation, yet you find yourself planted in soil that doesn't nourish that growth. Perhaps you live in a small town or work remotely, or your daily routine is built around tasks rather than interactions. You go from the screen to your room, from errands to solitude, and wonder why connection feels so far away. The Stoics remind us that we cannot always choose our circumstances, but we can choose our orientation toward them. Marcus Aurelius endured the isolation of command and the weight of leadership. He didn't escape solitude, he examined it. And in doing so, he transformed absence into reflection. If your environment lacks social opportunity, that's not a personal failing, it's a logistical truth. But within that truth lies a gentle challenge. Can you become more intentional about where you place yourself? Friendships require exposure, not to everyone, but to the right ones. 1. The Lion Space can change everything. A local class, a spiritual group, a volunteering effort, a shared interest forum. Start where it feels real. Ask not, how do I meet more people, but where do the people who value what I value tend to gather? Then move toward that space. Slowly, honestly, without the need to perform. You don't need to force extroversion, you just need to increase alignment. Even one new context, one shift in rhythm, can open the door to companionship. The Stoic path is not about seeking the crowd, but standing firm enough that when another sincere soul walks by, they recognize you by your presence. So if your current world feels socially dry, don't despair. Shift the soil, change the air, replant, not because you're lacking, but because you're ready to grow. Part 4. Lack of social skills. No one comes into the world fully equipped to connect. Social skills, like any other form of intelligence, are learned through observation, trial and error, reflection, and guidance. And yet, we rarely give ourselves that grace. We assume that making friends should come naturally, that conversations should always flow, that group settings should feel effortless. But what if they don't? The Stoics taught that we must approach self-improvement with both rigor and kindness. Seneca said, "While we teach, we learn." In other words, we develop mastery not by waiting to be perfect, but by engaging, even when we're unsure. If you've spent years feeling awkward in crowds, anxious at parties, or misunderstood in dialogue, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you haven't been taught or haven't had space safe enough to practice being yourself around others. Some people fear judgment, others freeze when attention is on them. Some don't know how to start a conversation, while others don't know how to end one. These aren't personality flaws, they're missing tools. And the good news? Tools can be acquired. The Stoic response is to begin with self-awareness. Notice your tendencies. Do you avoid eye contact? Do you dominate conversations out of nervousness or stay silent out of fear? What patterns arise when you feel uncomfortable socially? Without judgment, observe them, write about them, reflect, and then practice differently. Maybe it's one meaningful compliment per day. Maybe it's staying in a conversation 30 seconds longer than you normally would. Maybe it's asking a thoughtful question instead of waiting to be asked. These small shifts build social muscle and social courage. Being socially skilled isn't about being the loudest or most charismatic person in the room. It's about making others feel seen and safe in your presence. That is a rare and quiet art, one the Stoics would deeply admire. So if you find yourself alone, not because you want to be, but because connection feels out of reach, remind yourself, you are not inadequate. You are simply learning. And every day, in every interaction, is a chance to shape that skill with intention. Part 5. Changing circumstances. Life never stands still. Friendships that once felt unshakable can fade as time shifts the ground beneath them. It's not betrayal, it's not failure, it's change. Inevitable, silent, and often bittersweet. The Stoics knew this deeply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to greet each new reality as a visitor, not to cling to what was, but to respond wisely to what is. Perhaps you moved to a new city. Perhaps your job changed, or your family expanded, or your daily routines now leave no room for spontaneous connection. The people you once saw every day are now reduced to distant check-ins or social media glimpses, and something in your chest tightens, not from anger, but from absence. But the Stoic view asks us to look closer. Was the friendship real only because it was convenient? Or can it be reborn in another form? Or released entirely with gratitude? Not all distance is a loss. Sometimes it's an invitation to see who still shows up when proximity disappears, an invitation to let new people in, not to replace the old, but to reflect who you are now. You are not static, neither are your friendships. When circumstances shift, so do our needs. Maybe you now crave depth over fun, truth over novelty, or stillness over noise. That's not isolation, that's refinement. And refinement often comes with reduction. Seneca once wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." That includes the power to accept when friendships have served their season. Letting go is not coldness, it's clarity. It's honoring what was without forcing what no longer fits. So if life has changed and your circle has changed with it, pause, breathe, bless what was, and walk with openness toward what might be. Because every ending in Stoicism is also the beginning of something more aligned. Part 6. Shifting priorities, or growth. We often think friendships drift because someone did something wrong, but more often they dissolve because we grow in different directions. What once fit perfectly begins to feel tight. The laughter that used to echo so easily now fades into awkward silence, and the topics that once bonded you together now barely spark interest. Not because the love is gone, but because the path has shifted. The Stoics taught that life is a river, constantly moving. To resist its current is to suffer. To flow with it is to live wisely. Your priorities today may not match who you were 5 years ago. That's not inconsistency, that's evolution. You may now value depth over popularity, clarity over noise, or truth over comfort. And as you grow into your values, your relationships will either rise with you or gently fall away. This shift doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. You realize you no longer crave the same conversations. You notice that your time and energy are limited, and you begin to invest them more intentionally. The people who no longer fit aren't bad. They're just from a chapter that's now behind you. And the Stoic in you doesn't resent the change. It honors the season, learns from it, and moves forward with peace. Growth can be lonely, but it's the kind of loneliness that clears space for something richer. When you choose inner alignment over outer approval, you may lose some company, but you gain your own trust. That's a worthy trade. So if your friendships have faded not from conflict, but from change, don't mourn what's gone, celebrate what's true. You're not becoming someone harder to be around. You're becoming someone harder to fake life with. And those who are meant for your next chapter, they'll meet you there with the same integrity you've found within. Part 7. Mental well-being. Sometimes it's not the world that feels far, it's yourself. When your mental well-being is fragile, the simplest interaction can feel like climbing a mountain. Smiling becomes a task. Responding to a message feels like emotional labor. And social gatherings? They're not lifelines, they're weights. The Stoics acknowledged pain, suffering, and illness not as signs of weakness, but as calls to inner awareness. They didn't reject discomfort, they studied it. If you're struggling with depression, anxiety, burnout, or grief, it's not surprising that your social life is thinned. These states shrink the mind's capacity for openness. When survival becomes your main concern, even in quiet, hidden ways, connection becomes a luxury. The Stoic doesn't judge this. They invite you to meet yourself where you are. Maybe you cancel plans. Maybe you avoid initiating. Maybe even talking feels exhausting. That doesn't make you unfriendly. It makes you human. And being human includes seasons of retreat. Mental health affects our ability to be present, and presence is the root of connection. If you are distant from others, it might be because you've been distant from your own needs for too long. The Stoic response isn't to push through blindly, but to pause with purpose, to rest, to seek help, to nourish the parts of you that feel depleted. It's easy to look at your empty social calendar and see failure, but perhaps it's not failure. Perhaps it's a quiet message from your soul. Come home first. Come back to me. You don't build friendships on exhaustion, you build them on presence. And presence begins with care for your body, for your mind, and for the quiet self inside you that's waiting to be listened to. The stronger that relationship becomes, the more authentically you'll be able to show up for others, not out of performance, but out of peace. So if your mind has felt heavy and your heart closed, give yourself grace. Not every season is for blooming. Some are for rooting. Some are for remembering what it means to feel whole again, even in your aloneness. Part 8. Lifestyle Choices. There are lives lived quietly, far from the spotlight, outside the usual rhythm of society. Some people choose simplicity, to live slowly, to rise with the sun, to avoid noise, to immerse themselves in craft, nature, faith, or family. These choices may lead to solitude, not by accident, but by design. And while others gather in crowds or constant connection, you might choose calm. You might choose peace. You might choose a different way. The Stoics would nod in understanding. They did not preach conformity, they praised congruence. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That includes designing a life that aligns with your deepest values, even if it means walking alone. Perhaps you travel often. Perhaps your schedule is odd. Perhaps you've said no to certain social norms, drinking, partying, gossiping, not because you're better, but because you're different. And in that difference, you may find yourself without a typical circle. But solitude is not a punishment for being true. It's often the consequence and the reward. There is power in a lifestyle that nourishes your soul, even if it doesn't fit others' expectations. The cost of that power is sometimes disconnection. But the Stoic teaches us not to measure a life by the number of voices around us, but by the quality of our own voice within. So if your days are quiet, your routines intentional, and your space mostly your own, ask yourself, is this loneliness or is this alignment? One wounds, the other heals. And sometimes the line between them is just awareness. Friendship can thrive in unconventional lives, but it may arrive slower, more thoughtfully. That's okay. The ones who resonate with your rhythm will find you. Until then, live honestly, live well, and let your life speak so clearly that when true connection arrives, it recognizes you instantly. Part 9. Differences in interests. Sometimes, the absence of friendship isn't about your availability, it's about your authenticity. You might feel like an outlier in most rooms. Maybe your passions run deeper than small talk. Maybe your curiosity leads you down paths few around you understand. Maybe you want to talk about philosophy, purpose, and mortality, but everyone else wants to discuss the weather or the latest trend. And that gap, while invisible, can feel immense. The Stoics never asked us to blend in. They asked us to live in accordance with our nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." When your interests, values, and worldview evolve beyond the common crowd, it's natural that your relationships thin. But this isn't loneliness out of lack, it's loneliness born from integrity. Having different interests doesn't make you difficult, it makes you discerning. You're not rejecting others, you're refusing to pretend. And while that means fewer casual connections, it makes room for something more: resonance. True friendship isn't about matching hobbies, it's about mirroring inner truths. It's less about we like the same things and more about we see the world through the same lens. So if your life feels quiet and you find yourself thinking, where are the people like me? Don't let that turn into self-doubt. Let it be a compass. Let it guide you not toward changing yourself to fit in, but toward finding or creating spaces where who you are isn't strange, but seen. It may take longer, but what you're building isn't quick connection, it's real companionship. And that's always. Let's close this journey together. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. Not just for listening, but for daring to look inward, to sit with questions many avoid, and to honor your path even if it looks different from the crowd's. In a culture that often measures connection by quantity, you've chosen to measure by quality, by depth, by meaning. The Stoics never promised us comfort. They promised clarity. And what you now carry isn't a solution, but a new kind of sight, one that allows you to see your solitude not as a punishment, but as a sacred space. A space where your values sharpen, where your presence deepens, where you begin to meet the one friend who will never leave you, yourself. May these reflections travel with you like a compass, quiet, steady, always there. And may you find peace not in being constantly surrounded, but in finally feeling whole, even in stillness. Until next time, take care of your thoughts, protect your energy, and walk with gentle strength. Thank you for being here.